So to start to the end, we built the berm, we built riffle 4, 3, 100%, built riffle 2 and 1, 50%, and the rock weir 50%, and then we flopped the river. When we swapped the river, after we were done working the first side with the fish passage and the pile cap and the rock weir, we cut a channel into the new Godfrey ditch, allowing the Godfrey to continuously take water. And then we opened up the berm slowly on the first stage of the job, allowing water to equalize, and then slowly cutting the water off on the first diversion area with sheep pile, working our way across the river, and then choking that off all the way and pushing the water off on the west side of the river to work on the second stage, to build the rest of the diversion and to complete riffle 2 and 1, and then complete the plug on the old Godfrey and re-veg the first half of the job.
Quite a bit of an experience with that. We ended up having to use 2 pumps on occasion in order to reach that structure. There was a lot of obstacles to overcome. Building bridge decks across the channel. There was, we tried to minimize the amount of pours we had to do, and we stayed on it for about 22 days straight, including weekends, just in order to get it done. We even spent, we had a guy stay the night there just to maintain the pumps. There was, on occasion, pumps went out at night, and he was able to service them and get them back running before we flooded out for the following day.
There was a consistent evolution to the project plan and approach throughout the timeline, and that ran the gamut from staffing turnover within the board itself and the need to educate new board members to bring them up to snuff with the project, the history, where we're at, kind of bookends as it relates to requirements within the grant and why certain designs weren't even applicable because they violate certain needs of the grant, all the way down to the need for shareholder approval for special assessments to garner the funding to acquire an easement. Additionally, as the project evolved, there seemingly was always just kind of one more to do as it relates to getting it across the finish line and that completion, all the way down to the Poudre's involvement and the original grant recipient kind of dissolving as an organization. 1 or 2 things could have fell differently, that it all went away overnight. And just kind of that variability, and just kind of at one point, 3 years into a design process and it almost falls apart 4 times, you have that human element of despair almost coming in, like, is this gonna happen? The amount of changes that occurred throughout the process and kind of initially unforeseen challenges as it relates to the expectations of all the roles and responsibilities of parties involved was definitely trying.
The existing conditions previous had a 9-foot failing structure. So you have a 9-foot drop in this very fine grained system, sand, gravel. And to be able to make up that 9-foot elevation difference and have a stable channel and, allow for fish passage, there was a lot trying to feed into how we were going to design this. And, the South Platte is not typically, you don't typically see riffles, cobbles, boulders in the South Platte, but when you're up against a 9-foot grade difference and you have a lot of competing needs and objectives for the project, I think we tried to split that ground as best as we could to create a stable channel as natural as possible, with the riffle structures, minimizing the height of the structure to be able to allow for the ditch flow, but also to minimize the amount of grade control that was needed throughout the structure. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how the river shifts and moves as we get some high flows coming through. But I think that was probably the biggest challenge in my mind, is how to stabilize a finer grain system with that big of a grade difference to make up.
One of the pieces that's most exciting to me from an ecologist's point of view, it was a unique design, adding in the riffle structures and the sand bed system. So I'll be really curious to see how that works out over the next few years once we get some floods through and higher water. But the structure was designed and they were able to get the proper slopes to meet the needs of these native small swimming fish. Really small, tiny fish actually can be able to make it up the fish passage structure, which I think is really exciting. And I know it was challenging to get the slopes just right. I think it ended up being 2% slope. The design of that ended up being more challenging than probably everyone anticipated, but they, were able to actually accomplish that, which I think is really important. And it'll be valuable. I think there's a lot of valuable lessons learned with what Otak went through and what throughout this design process and being able to show it on the ground and what it looks like.
The epiphany when I was out there after the fish passage ramp had been built and there was flow going down it, finding a fish on the ramp, that was exciting to me because it just puts it in perspective of why we're doing this. Not all why we're doing this, one of the reasons we're doing this, but to see it right there is that this little fish, maybe it came from upstream, but maybe it came from downstream and now it's going up. So I think that was, for me, a cool moment of the project to see tangible changes.
Ancillary benefits from being on site that nobody really anticipated. There was notable observations of an increase in wildlife in the area, a gaggle of 100+ turkeys hanging out, white-tailed deer showing up, red-tailed hawks to bald eagles to fish coming through. It was a notable uptick in terms of just the environmental improvements and kind of the physical observation of various species benefiting from that.
Glowing and excited for the newness of the project, and then you get kind of beat down throughout the process. And I feel like the end product, I think we're all super happy with how it turned out. And it's functioning as it was designed, the fish passage specifically, as well as making sure we're getting flow to the ditch, right? That's the number one priority, or number one in a list of priorities based on the grant funding. And I think we're meeting all of those objectives, which is super exciting to have at the end product and to be happy with it. And I don't know that I would change a whole lot.
Well, we came into this project really late in the game. So, the design had been ongoing for close to 3 years by the time that we took the project over, and was at about 80% design when we took the project over January 2020. But I would say that it definitely exceeded my expectations. This was the first project, of this scale that the Coalition for the Poudre River Watershed has managed. So I'm really impressed with the work that was done, and really looking forward to, seeing how it functions this summer and in its first years of operation, and also just the connections that we've made and the benefits to the South Platte River.
I'd say from the Godfrey Ditch's perspective, obviously we were always hoping to get a new river diversion that just increased efficiencies, added safety for our staff, negated the need for us to get in the river after every rain event. And as it relates to all those line items, the new infrastructure is a dream. Couldn't be happier with it. As it relates to the project as a whole, that was an evolution. And there was a lot of twists and turns that nobody really anticipated from day one. And we're just happy to see it reach its successful conclusion. And we're looking forward to getting our shareholders out there to just kind of show off the new infrastructure and the benefit to not just the shareholders and the system, but kind of that riparian corridor as a whole.
The biggest thing to me on that job was seeing the gates actuate all the way up, watching the water rise slowly, and watching the water go down the fish passage. I'm proud to be a part of the Godfrey team to see the finished product work. The Godfrey Ditch was fun though.